Welcome back. Cindy Dole here on this second day of the new year at the Post Parade, where we're all about having a chance to really appreciate all the beauty, all the detail that goes into these rose floats. And if you're anywhere near Pasadena right now, I hope you come on by. It's basically near the Pasadena High School. They block off several streets for this little virtual village that comes alive, and all the floats are parked here. They were here yesterday. Today's the last day. You have until 5 tonight. You can go to tournamentofroses.com and find out more about how you can get a shuttle and park here and come on down, because this is so much fun, and the rain hasn't come, which is so great. So among all the floats, I mean, really, as we were speaking with Raul Rodriguez, one of the prominent float designers, earlier today on the show, it really can range from the light and hearted, the animated, the whimsical, the silly, the funny, to the really serious and the memorable. And this was a float, as we were broadcasting right at the TV gallery at the corner of Orange Grove and Colorado. People were standing up in the grandstands saluting this float. And I'm talking about the 9/11 float. It was put on by the Los Angeles County Firemen's Benefit and Welfare Association, and it was called Remember, Reflect, and Renew. And with me is Mary Thompson, and she and her husband Jerry thought about this idea. And so, Mary, thanks for joining us today to talk a little bit more about how this all came to be.
Thank you so much for having us.
So your husband is a fireman, right?
That's correct, an LA County fireman.
And so talk back about, I guess it was last year or maybe earlier than that, you were watching the Rose Parade, and what was going through your mind?
Well, last year, my husband and I were watching the Rose Parade on January 1st, and he had commented that next year would be the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. And as we were watching it, I thought, well, we should do a float honoring the 10-year anniversary of 9/11 and make it a full tribute float. So that day, we applied on the Tournament of Roses website, and now we have this beautiful float to show for it.
And when you say you applied, talk people through that process, because I think a lot of people want to know, hey, how can I have a float? Well, some people can, some people can't.
Well, it's funny because we, when we did it, everybody has a theme. You know, the Tournament of Roses has a theme, our float had a theme, and Jerry and I's float this entire year was Ignorance is Bliss. We did not know the process of how to do things. We just kind of just did it, and everything kind of just fell into place. I've heard from a lot of people it's very difficult to have a float in the Tournament of Roses parade. So that we have one, and it's been recognized and is so beautiful, has just been amazing. It's been a reward in itself. But to go back to how we applied, we just kind of sent in a request saying this should be done. It needs to be done. And there was a form, and then at the end of February, beginning of March, they asked us for a little bit more detail about why we wanted the float and how it fits in with the theme of this year.
Yeah.
And the
theme being building dreams, friendships, and memories. And
correct.
So, yeah.
It was, and so we just felt like, it just was so appropriate, and it fit in perfectly with this year's theme. And then we found out that our application was accepted after they reviewed it, and we thought, oh my gosh, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was
what a responsibility. I mean, I'm wondering, is a serious float more difficult than a lighthearted float?
The thing that I think was the most difficult is because when we applied for it, we applied as two Americans. We weren't applying as having a sponsor behind us or a corporation behind us. It was just he and I wanting to fulfill a promise that we made 10 years ago. And so...
And what was your promise 10 years ago?
That we would never forget 9/11.
Gotcha.
And that we would never forget the nearly 3,000 victims that whose lives were cut short that day.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any financial backing. It was basically all on us to look for that and to get the volunteers and to kind of figure out the process. So it was pretty scary there for a while, and luckily the firemen's and the Los Angeles County Firemen's Benefit and Welfare believed in us and believed in this so much that they said that they would help us fulfill this promise. So we are very grateful to them. And And really, it's all based on donations because we would like to pay the benefit and welfare back because they too are a nonprofit organization.
So are you guys in debt now, or were we able to? Yeah.
Well, we're still seeking donations because we are still a little bit behind of what we wanted to pay them back, and so we can, we're still happily accepting donations. So you can always look for us on our website, www.911rosefloat.com. Okay. And you can check out our story about how Jerry and I started this process. And everybody who has been on our committee has been a volunteer. Some work for LAPD, a couple of our website designer and our official photographer, our firemen that work with Jerry. They just believed in us, and before we even had a float design, they believed in us, and we will be forever grateful to them.
And tell us about, there's so many stories tied to this one float. The people that were on the float. Talk about how you reached out to them and their reaction to being on the float. I mean, you had a survivor or two. Tell us about the people who were on the float.
Well, Jerry and I, we because of the theme, Remember, Reflect, Renew, we really wanted to capture the renew part. And so everybody we had on the float has taken the tragedy of 9/11 and they've turned it into something positive. So when we were reaching out to people, we wanted to, we just happened to just kind of fall into them. And so it was almost like it was meant to be like the ones that were writing on it. So the first people that we had contacted were John and Veronica Roberts. Their son was 31 years old and was a firefighter in New York, and he was on engine 214. And he went into Tower 2 and did not return home that day. So these parents have really tried to keep his memory alive and him alive through helping different organizations like the Wounded Warriors, and they always get shirts made up and make sure that anybody, because they always say Michael would take the shirt off his back. So they always give shirts out with his name on it to make sure that it's continuing, that people will never forget. And they're an awesome couple, and they were so honored to be on that float yesterday. It was amazing to see their reaction to it.
I bet. Almost kind of therapeutic in a way, huh? Especially as the crowd showed appreciation, and really there were standing ovations. It was one of the favorite floats,
Yeah.
And then Esteban Silva, survivor, was on the float, right?
Yes. He was on the 61st floor of Tower 2, and he was only there for training for Morgan Stanley, and he was in New York for just, I think it was his second day in New York, and they did their training sections in the World Trade Tower, and he's actually from California. So he was taking his morning break, and they had noticed that there was debris flying outside the window, and they were thinking, what happened? Why are people throwing papers out the window? And then that's when it came over the loudspeaker that they needed to evacuate Tower 2. And but they didn't know that Tower 1 had been hit by a plane until somebody had said, and they thought it was a small plane, like an accident.
Right.
So as they were heading down the staircase at the 45th floor, the speakers came back on and said that Tower 2 was secure and that they may return back to their offices. And as he tells it, he says that it was almost like he was the dividing line. Everybody behind him went back up to their offices. Everybody below him wanted to evacuate. And never been there before, he thought, well, I guess I'll just head down to the 44th floor and go to the transfer station, because the buildings were so tall that they'd have transfer stations for the elevators to continue on up or escalators to continue on up at different levels. And so he thought, I'll climb down one more level and go into the transfer station, and he did. And when he got to the 44th floor and was waiting for the elevator, that's when the plane came into Tower 2. And he said that what was once escalators was just twisted metal, and the building shook so violently. he said he just thought right then and there he was not going to make it out, but he was able to climb down, and when he got to about the 7th floor, that's when he noticed all the firemen going up, and Veronica Roberts meeting Steve Silva, she felt like maybe Steve had said something to her son, which it was some sort of connection because both of them were in Tower 2 at the same time. So it was just, stories like that. You wondered, did they come across each other? And you hope that they did. And then again, we also had James Lachek, who's the president of the Pentagon Memorial Fund. His brother was a civilian working in the Pentagon at the time and didn't make it. And so he and a lot of the other family members of the Pentagon established the Memorial Fund, where they were able to successfully get a memorial built, and it is one of the most beautiful memorials I've ever seen in my life. It's very touching, very touching. So we were very pleased and honored to have him represent the Pentagon on the float. And we also had, which is very dear to my heart, Patricia Smith and her dad, Jim Smith. Patricia was only 2 years old when her mother, Maura Smith, NYPD, was killed in the line of duty in Tower 2. She was the only female police officer killed in the line of duty that day for NYPD, and they went through a story in itself on how to get here because of the blizzard. So I have to hand it to Jim Smith, because he was going to do whatever he could to get his daughter on that float, and he did. He did. Even getting here and not having his luggage. I mean, it was, so that man deserves a standing ovation in itself, because he did what he could. So
we have just a couple minutes left, and I know that a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen to this float. Are there going to be ways to preserve some of these fluorographs? And some Yeah, Matt and Katie have been great. They know the sentiment behind it, and all the volunteers who work. We called it the labor of love, because every volunteer works so hard on it. So the patches, like for Port Authority, we're going to preserve them, and we're shipping it back to them so that they can put it in their in one of their police departments. Nice.
And then we also have some of the patches we're going to ship off to the different organizations that were so generous enough to allow us to use it. So we feel very, very honored, and we figured what better way to remind Americans but on the first day of the 10th year to bring out those flags again, to be a little bit more patient and to help one another, because on September 11th, 2001, we all were we were a family. No matter where we were in the United States, we were the American family, and we need to kind of bring that back. So,
well, thank you, Mary and Jerry. Mary and Jerry Thompson, what's your website again, so people can learn more about and reach out to you and help if they'd like to?
Okay, it's www.911rosefloat.com.
Awesome.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Cindy.
you. We loved hearing about it. I mean, there's not enough time because you have so many great stories, but hopefully those of you who are listening, you can come and see the float in person, appreciate the beauty and all that the effort that Jerry and Mary went through to get this to this point, and all the other folks who are tied to September 11th in some way. So thank you, and a great 2011 as we are approaching the 10th anniversary of that day we'll never forget. Up next, another poignant float. It was a tribute to the Ronald Reagan years and the Reagan Foundation, and that too had a lot of amazing fluorographs on it. We're going to hear about the makings of that float and what it all means next as we broadcast live from the Post Parade in Pasadena. I'm Cindy Dole on KFWB News Talk 980.